The chances of a kidnapping victim being found safely are slim to none. In most cases, loved ones are lucky just to find remains. There have been a few rare and touching cases in which individuals were kidnapped and thankfully survived after being found or escaping. While there's plenty of trauma for these survivors to endure after they're freed, most of them will tell you they're still grateful to have made it out. Most of these victims are now in their adult years, allowing them to give wiser insight into their cases. Number 5. Elizabeth Smart is one of the most well-known kidnapping survivors because when she grew up, she started devoting her time to being an activist. She spreads awareness and speaks publicly about kidnapping cases and the necessary resources to improve the search system. She's also been the subject of many books, movies, and interviews. She's even referenced frequently in media and has basically become a household name, so it would be a crime to leave her out of this list. Brian David Mitchell broke into the Federal Heights area home of Edward and Louise Smart in Salt Lake City. Brian silently broke in during the early morning hours on June 5, 2002, before the sun had even risen. The Smarts had 6 children together that were sleeping in the home. For reasons unknown, Brian chose to target Elizabeth, who woke up when she heard him enter the house. Elizabeth's sister shared a room with her but pretended to be asleep as Brian approached Elizabeth. According to their reports, he approached the 14-year-old with a knife. Brian left with Elizabeth in hand. Her sister fell back asleep and reported that she thought everything had been a dream, which she was shocked to learn wasn't true when her parents went into a frenzy after being unable to find her. The same day, Ed and Louise Smart spoke during a TV presentation in which they begged for their daughter to be returned home safely. For months, police and other groups worked tirelessly to find the young girl. Search parties with as many as 2,000 people scored the neighborhood and local parks. Bloodhounds were put to work, and of course the media was involved. In fact, the media took an abnormally active role in covering the story of Elizabeth. Producers, reporters, and her own parents made sure that her name and story was shared in the news at least once every day. Flyers and information were spread in other cities and areas of town. Brian and his accomplice, Wanda Barzee, kept Elizabeth shackled to a tree a few miles in the woods behind Brian's home. She was provided a small tent to live in, regardless of weather conditions. She was given food and water, and just enough to supply her and keep her alive. Brian performed made-up rituals, which he claimed made himself and Elizabeth a married couple. He gave her drugs and alcohol to calm her down before assaulting her and made claims that she was an angel. Brian and Wanda took Elizabeth into the public on several occasions, putting a disguise on her each time. She went unnoticed countless times, but finally, Elizabeth's younger sister provided a description of Brian and a sketch was created. That photo was shared in the media across the nation and even on an episode of America's Most Wanted. Because of this coverage, Brian's family called in to identify him. A short while later, someone noticed Brian, Wanda, and Elizabeth in the city. Officers hurried to the scene, and upon interviewing Elizabeth, they instantly knew that it was her. She was rescued in March of 2003, 9 months after she had vanished. Her abductors were arrested on the spot and went to trial. Brian was later sentenced to life in prison without parole. Wanda, however, made a plea agreement and was released in September of 2018, against Elizabeth's wishes. Today, Elizabeth Smart is an American child safety activist and ABC News commentator that shares her story to the public and victims that may have gone through the same thing. Number 4. On June 10, 1991, 11-year-old Jaycee Dugard's mother left their Myers, California home earlier than usual to get to work. After she left, Jaycee got dressed for school in her favorite pink outfit and started walking toward the bus stop, which was a few blocks away after a tall hill. Jaycee was about halfway to her stop when a mysterious car began slowly driving next to her. Eventually, the car stopped and so did Jaycee. She assumed the driver would just ask for directions, but unfortunately, that wasn't the case at all. The driver rolled down his window and shot her with the stun gun, knocking her unconscious. The suspect then proceeded to abduct her. The driver was Philip Garrido, a man with a history of kidnapping and assault charges. The kidnapping itself actually housed a handful of witnesses. Carl Probin, Jaycee's stepfather, witnessed the abduction from his home. He saw the suspect's car make a quick U-turn and tried to rush to the scene on his bike before anything could happen, but sadly he didn't make it in time. Other witnesses from the bus stop and neighborhood shared stories that matched Carl's. This case was different because the family knew exactly what happened to their daughter. They just had no idea where she was being taken. Later investigations found that after snatching her, Philip took the victim to a storage unit near his home, about 3 hours away from Jaycee's hometown. Despite search efforts, Jaycee remained in captivity for 18 years. She was fed well but treated poorly, frequently assaulted and belittled. Eventually, Jaycee met Nancy Garrido, Philip's wife. When retelling the story of her time in captivity, Jaycee explains that she was manipulated the most by Nancy, who at first tearfully apologized to the child and offered a sense of motherly love and concern, before switching to a cold, cruel, and uncaring person. Jaycee had 2 daughters as a result of the assault. The first daughter was born in 1994 when Jaycee was only 13. The second daughter came in 1997 when she was around 16. She was given very little help from Nancy and Philip, so she had to learn about taking care of children on her own. Over the years, her abductors provided her small increments of additional freedom, like being allowed in the house and being served a hot meal once in a while. During all of this, Jaycee's parents were still desperately searching for her, which included paying thousands of dollars to private investigators when they felt the work of local police wasn't enough. In August of 2009, while Philip was dealing with unrelated legal matters, he took his wife, Jaycee, and her 2 children to a parole office. Jaycee maintained her false identity as Alicia when questioned by police. She told officers that even though she knew Philip was a convicted offender, she saw him as a changed man and a good person, which clearly posed as signs of Stockholm Syndrome. Police pressured Jaycee about her real name, and according to them, she became very angry. Meanwhile, Philip confessed to detectives that she was kidnapped. After he confessed, Jaycee reluctantly admitted to the same details. The abductors were arrested, and after some time, Jaycee was given full custody of her own children and reunited with her mother. Jaycee has served as another powerful example of what kidnapping victims go through, the threat of Stockholm Syndrome, and how to deal with the trauma that follows being freed. She's now a 39-year-old woman and is living a happy life full of blessings. Number 3. On December 28, 1992, 2 days before her 10th birthday, Katie Bierce was abducted by a family friend in New York. John Esposito was allegedly a good friend of the family, so when he approached the young girl and promised to give her birthday presents, a cake, and a party, she believed him. She got into his car and quickly began to realize she wasn't being taken to a party at all. At some point, from an unknown location, Katie called her godmother and left her a voicemail saying that she'd been kidnapped by a man with a knife. Katie's family quickly noticed that she was missing, and the voicemail confirmed her worst fears. The Bierce family automatically made the assumption that John was responsible for the daughter's disappearance. John had a previous criminal case in which he attempted to abduct a 7-year-old in a mall. He had assaulted Katie's brother once before as well, but when questioned, John claimed that a third party had kidnapped Katie after he took her to an indoor amusement park for her birthday. Police collected surveillance footage of the park and found that Katie wasn't kidnapped there. In fact, John went to a spaceplex by himself. When he was trying to feed the lies to detectives, Katie was being held in a 6x7 concrete bunker. The bunker was located in a hidden space underneath John's garage in Bayshore, New York. A 200-pound concrete trapdoor covered the only way in and out of Katie's small prison. Inside the bunker, there was a functioning toilet, a TV, a mattress, and chains used to restrain Katie. During a later investigation, John claimed that he'd built the bunker for Katie to enjoy. He then confessed to abducting her and led police to Katie. On January 13, 1993, Katie was found safe and alive in the bunker. A year later, on July 27, 1994, John was charged for his crimes and sentenced to 15 years in prison. Although he wasn't charged for this, Katie later revealed that John had assaulted her. It was discovered that Katie had been abused and neglected by her family prior to the kidnapping, so she was put into the custody of a foster family where she stayed until she was an adult. In 2013, Katie published a memoir about her experience and the aftermath. Another brave young woman that survived a deadly situation is now offering insight and support to others. Number 2. A woman by the name of Alicia is now a 31-year-old success story. She's considered a TV personality, a motivational speaker, an advocate for internet safety and missing persons cases, and has even formed her own advocacy group known as Alicia Project, which raises awareness about online predators, child safety, and abduction. Alicia isn't just some journalist taking advantage of the media while talking about subjects, though. She actually faced the cruel reality of these topics firsthand when she was a teen. In 2001, when she was about 13 years old, Alicia began talking to someone online that she thought was a young boy her own age. The stranger then approached her in a Yahoo chat room. and was actually a 38-year-old man known as Scott Tyree. For over a year, the suspect kept this charade with Alicia. He showed signs of grooming her, which is a term that refers to the action of a pedophile when they prepare a victim to meet in person. The family computer at Alicia's home was located in a common area and was allegedly monitored. However, Scott would mostly contact the teen at night when everyone else was asleep. On New Year's Day in 2002, Scott convinced Alicia to let him pick her up from her home in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. She agreed, and after she got into the car, he drove her back to his house in Virginia. Alicia was held captive for 4 days in a dungeon-like room in Scott's basement. She was abused, attacked, assaulted, and kept in an unhealthy living condition. Scott filmed videos of the abuse and Alicia, which he allegedly posted online. Photos of the victim were shared online and broadcast on news stations throughout America. A viewer from Florida recognized Alicia from the twisted videos and called in an anonymous tip in which they shared Scott's online username. Police used this to uncover his IP address and ultimately find his residence. On January 4th, 2002, officers ambushed Scott's home. At first, Alicia thought the men were hired by Scott to kill her, but after a calm conversation with officers, she finally agreed around 4 p.m. that day. Following her return, Alicia found that most people blamed her for the outcome of her case, with little to no understanding of how grooming works, and she received a fair amount of backlash. However, that was fuel for her to go down a path which would investigate the process of grooming and the world of online chats filled with pedophiles. Once again, the survivor used her trauma to grow and help others by spreading awareness. After his arrest, Scott was sentenced to prison time, but he was released in February of 2019 to a halfway house, just a few miles from where Alicia was kidnapped. Alicia has disputed this decision, but there's been no update on whether or not Scott was relocated. For some, this is an example of how careless the justice system can be when releasing criminals. Number 1. On June 22, 2002, 15-year-old Kara Robinson was spending time with her best friend Heather when the two decided to go swimming. No parents were home when Heather decided to take a shower while Kara went outside to water some plants. Kara explained that she was still in her pajamas when a mysterious car pulled into the driveway and parked. A well-dressed man stepped out and walked toward Kara with brochures in hand. He told her he was passing the materials out in the neighborhood and asked if her mom was home. Unaware of the damage she was causing, Kara said that no one was home at the time and that it was her friend's house. After that, the stranger stepped closer to her and made her feel uneasy. While handing her the brochures with his left hand, he quickly pulled out a gun with his right and pointed it at Kara. He then forced her into the car, where he put her in a large Rubbermaid container and placed the top on it. Kara stated that she remembered trying to listen to every stop and turn that they took, to follow where she was being taken. The man stopped to restrain Kara and sealed the top of the container, and then he dragged it for a few minutes across what Kara believed to be concrete. The next time he opened the container, they were in his apartment. Kara was let out of the box and paid attention to every detail of his home, trying to gather as much information as possible. The two conversed for a short time, both trying to collect details about the other. Then, the suspect used a knife against Kara and assaulted her for several hours. He frequently mentioned that she would be well missed and a huge search would be held in her honor. That night, Kara was restrained in the suspect's bed. He slept through the night, and in the early morning hours, Kara woke up and realized that she had a chance for escape. Using a determined set of skills, she managed to unscrew her restraints and slip out of the bed without making a sound. Kara then rushed to the open, noisy door and made a run for it. With one handcuff still dangling on her wrist, she darted through a parking lot and found a car with men inside. She told them that she'd been kidnapped and they took her to a nearby police station, where, according to Kara, the officer on duty didn't seem to believe her story or care. Her mother was called and reunited with her daughter a short while later. Police took Kara back to the apartment complex that she just escaped from in an attempt to apprehend her attacker. The suspect had already fled, but officers found his name and he was pulled over in another state later on, but then took his own life in front of police. Kara now offers her brave and thrilling story as a sign of hope and an example of overcoming danger. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to click that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep updated with our videos. And if you enjoy this narration, maybe consider checking out my personal channel at youtube.com/ty_knots.